let us start with our meeting today. As I said to all by email, we are going to focus now in our next meetings on regulatory sandboxes on AI. And we have today Antonino Rotolo and Diego Machado. Antonino Rotolo is an expert in an important researcher in the field of AI and law. I know him from a long ago doing research, first on logic applied to law, and now with the advancements of artificial intelligence in other subjects. But it's really an honor to have and an opportunity to have Nino Rotolo. Here, and now Nino is leading. He will talk about this to us. He's leading an European project that is structured sandboxes in Europe related to the development of AI systems. And we will have also Diego Machado, who is now hands-on working and leading the Brazilian Data Protection Authority project on regulatory sandboxes. Actually, it is my first meeting with Diego Machado, and we are going to work together in this project since our proposal by the University of São Paulo that was led by Cristina Godoy and myself was selected to provide support and the methodology to the Data Protection Authority sandbox, to this new initiative. So, and today it was an interesting opportunity for us to present the main ideas behind the ANPD. ANPD, Nino, is the Data Protection Authority in Brazil. And to present these ideas, some preliminary views, which are based on the public consultation that ANPD has launched last year. And it would be interesting then for us actually, if you could, after his presentation, provide us with your impressions and your ideas on sandbox. Of course, there was the public consultation, but new opinion, suggestion, and deliberation is always helpful. And Nino, probably you want to have lunch after your talk, but if you would like to stay a little bit further to hear Diego, you are invited to, and then I would ask Diego to shift to English if it's not a problem.
Okay, because I'm very happy to stay. I can stay with you till 2 in 1 hour, so till 2 p.m.
So
Continental Europe time, which means we have 50 minutes for me. Then I have to stop.
Perfect. So then we can hear your talk, and then Diego in English if it's not a problem. And then we move to internal debates that will be in Portuguese, so it makes no sense for you to stay. But it would be interesting anyway, Nino, because I believe this is an opportunity for us to interact on this subject from now on.
Absolutely, I agree.
Okay, so I give you the floor, Nino.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So I will share. So I think what I can do, Giuliano, is to, first of all, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Amanda. I'm running all day long, and so I go directly to the point. But thank you very much for inviting me. If you are interested as a group in working on sandboxes, I hope this will be just one first meeting, but I hope to share again results, and also and the other way around would be very, very, very good for me as well. So what I can do today is we briefly present the project so you understand what we do, and I will just mention some topics that now we are discussing, we are handling regarding AI regulatory sandbox. So I share my screen. I think you see the slides. Please confirm.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I'm the coordinator of this project called EU Regulatory Sandboxes for AI. Is a project, is a special project in the sense it's a coordination support action. So the reason is that, as you know, as you may know, European Union in the AI Act, the regulation on artificial intelligence, among the many things that are established in the regulation, states that the member states should, the 27 member states in the European Union should establish at least one AI regulatory sandbox per state. Right, so which means that by August 26, Europe will have at least 27 different AI regulatory sandboxes. Actually, they could be more, they could be less, because actually we also are also considering possibilities that, like, cross-border sandboxes, so more member states join the same sandbox. I will tell you something later about that. So USER is a project that supports all the 27 member states. So we are working with all the 27 member states in Europe. We are running meetings, bilateral meetings with all member states, and we are supporting the AI Office of the European Commission in the implementation of the AI Act regarding the sandboxes. The AI Act is already in force, but the implementing measures, the technical measures for implementing the regulation have not yet published, so they will be part of the process that will complete in 25, in order to make possible that 26 all the implementing measures will be in place properly. So we are contributing also to this process in complementing the work on the AI Office on the. So it's a very demanding project, actually, because we interact with all the member states, and Europe is big, and they are diverse in terms of capabilities and stuff like that. But
so, the idea is that the different regulatory sandbox in different member states would have an uniform framework.
Exactly. That's the idea, to have a uniform framework, because actually the regulation is unique in Europe, in the European Union, and it means that we should harmonize regulatory sandbox in the different member states. Of course, it's challenging because establishing regulatory sandbox requires competencies, investments, infrastructures, and that makes difficult sometimes with harmonization. But this is exactly what we have to do as a project, to support the Commission and support member states to establish their own sandboxes in a common framework. Exactly. Okay, so this is the consortium, and I think the consortium, I will just spend I will not present all the members of the consortium, but I can spend a couple of words on why we probably succeeded. One of the reasons that we have one alliance, which is European Digital SMEs Alliance. The reason is that according to European the AI Act, SMEs and startups should have access to the AI regulatory sandboxes for free. So it's not established any fee to be paid to the sandbox in order to get access to the sandboxes. Only for digital SMEs, only for SMEs and startups. For larger companies, they have to pay. And in Europe, there are also other initiatives that are now developing for supporting the development of AI technologies. But that's another story. So one thing is that we wanted to have the largest alliance of the digital SMEs in Europe. The alliance, it comprises more than 45,000 SMEs. And why? Because according to the AI Act, the sandboxes are an opportunity for SMEs and startups, but we need to know their needs. One big mistake that I think we have to avoid is that to design sandboxes without paying attention to what are the needs of the SMEs and startups, because going through the sandbox according to the AI Act is not mandatory for AI provider for companies that develop AI technologies. It's not mandatory, right? So you should have some added value in passing through the sandboxes, and this value should be understood. So one issue that we are mentioning to the Commission and to the member states, that don't make a mistake in designing something that is very nice, but is completely detached from the needs of the SMEs and startups.
And actually, also, Nino, that will be difficult for startups to comply with the requirements to join the sandbox. Otherwise,
Exactly.
if it's not obligatory, and if it's so difficult, they're not going to get incentives to go through it.
Exactly. I mean, but there are some lessons learned, for example, from other types of sandboxes, like, for example, the fintech sandboxes that are, I spoke with main fintechs. I spoke with the English, the British one. There was the first in the world, but also there are a couple of very dynamic sandboxes, fintechs, sandboxes in Singapore, for example, in Hong Kong. And they said to me, look, the added value for companies that, for example, when they get out, bless you, they get out from the sandboxes, they are more attractive for venture capitals. Okay, so the added value for startups is that as soon as you get out, you pass through the sandbox, then you are more attractive for venture capital, so investments, right? This is one of the added value you may provide. There are other added value you can provide, but that's one of the reasons why we have the digital SMEs online. Another type of partners that we bring, three of the most important high performance computing infrastructure in Europe. They are among the top 20, top 15 in the world. So we have Cineca, BSC, and CSC. Why so? Because actually it depends on what type of sandbox you have in mind. I will tell you something later. I take 5 minutes later, but you can have a purely conversational sandbox. So is providing a legal advice without any testing, but you may also guarantee some testing. And if you do so, you need some digital infrastructures. And in Europe, in European Union, there is now a big investment in developing such digital infrastructure, large digital infrastructure, supporting the development of AI technologies, which make some ideas of regulatory sandbox very interesting, also in the perspective of testing. And there are also some other partners. We also have an authority from one of the member states, but I will not go into all the details about all the consortiums. So the rationale, as I said, is support the development of sandboxes. We will develop a framework, so develop a guidelines, methodologies, tools, for all the member states. We will develop a synergy with other initiatives. And, in Europe, we have the AI factories. They are very large digital infrastructure entities that also combine important competencies in terms of compliance, development of technologies, blah, blah, blah. And so the plan of Europe, now in Europe, we have 13 different AI factories There is one in Italy, two in Germany, one in France, in Finland, in Spain, blah, blah, blah. So, and that's an important contribution synergy. So in Europe, one of the problems of Sandbox is that Sandbox should be connected, the activity of Sandbox should be connected with other initiatives that are happening and are supporting the development of AI technologies. Then we have these testing environments, they are called TEFs, and also European Digital Innovation Hubs that are also other initiatives supported by the Commission that are spread in the different member states that can support the pipeline of the sandboxes. One important initiative now is what we call the standardized, the harmonized standards. You know, as you know, there are some standards, compliance standards for AI developed by ISO, for example, and other bodies. But in the AI Act, the European regulation requires that we should develop harmonized standards. And those harmonized standards can provide some compliance standards for the AI technologies. The interesting story about standards, that standards are also useful for the post-market perspective. So not just before the market, you put on the market the technology, and which is the typical role of AI regulatory sandbox according to the AI Act. But the standards provide the compliance standards in the post-market perspective, and they are supposed to be important also in terms of liability. So one of the possible way for, according to the AI Act, to our regulation, is that when you go to the market, you have to pass the so-called conformity assessment, right? Which is a procedure according to which you get basically the logo of the European Union. This is a product certified by European Union, right? To do so, you need to pass this conformity assessment, and one of the main options is based on the standards. So the companies should meet the standards for the AI technologies. And so in that case, we are working very, very hard also to align the pre-market and the post-market perspective. I don't know in Brazil, but in Europe now there is a big question regarding how to align the regulation for the pre-market risk assessment of the AI technologies, AI Act, and the post-market perspective, the liability perspective. We have a directive now in Italy, in Europe, that should be already enforced and which should be implemented by the member states in 26. So the sandboxes could be a very nice opportunity for simulating also some types of conformity. And that was an idea proposed by some member states in Europe. Of course, the priorities is to SMEs and startups. And also we will test our methodologies before the establishment, the formal establishment of the sandbox in Europe, which means 26. We will run three tests, one test in Barcelona, one test in Bologna, and one test in Helsinki in Finland. So that are the objectives, but I already said about that. So the AI Act and Article 57, 58, 59 states that AI sandboxes, regulatory sandboxes, are tools for fostering innovation. But the AI regulatory sandbox, that's something common in all parts of the world, should incorporate the authorities, the competent authorities, and that means that the governance of AI of the AI regulatory sandboxes is very important, because you have to bring in the governance all the competent authorities supervise the development of technologies, plus some other authorities that perhaps are not appointed by member states as those that are responsible for supervising the technology of the AI, of artificial intelligence, but are still very important. For example, that I don't know in Brazil, so I would be eager to listen to you, but in European Union, you need to establish basically two types of authorities, the notifying authority and the market surveillance authority, but then member states are free to appoint among those existing authorities those who play that role, or they can create a new authorities for AI. But this doesn't, so that this is one problem in Europe, right? So we have a different member states, different authorities that are playing the role of AI supervising authorities. But still, the other authorities that are not involved in their role should play a role. For example, suppose that in Italy, for example, the authorities that are going to be appointed are one covering cybersecurity and one covering public digitalization of public administration, right? But of course, the data protection authority should be involved in the governance because, you know, the AI regulatory sandbox are, you know, relevant. You know, it's impossible to test or to give an advice to AI providers, AI developer, any advice without the contribution also data protection authorities, and so forth. So here now one of the main problems of our project is to build also governance models for the sandboxes. So these are the targets I already said. So to conclude, I will just mention some of the topics now discussing. I don't know if they apply to Brazil, but you know, I can tell you what is going on in Europe. One problem is defining geographical scope of the sandbox. Why? Because you know, if you read the regulation, basically the regulation says one national AI regulatory sandbox, right? But then you can also bring a network of regional sandboxes, because sometimes, you know, member states have already some sandboxes, or like in some member states where you have a federal structure. For example, in Germany is a federal state. So the plan for Germany could be different from the plan from France, right? France is a very centralized country. Italy something in between, Spain something in between. So depending on the state, you may imagine that you may have just a national sandbox, or you may have more sandboxes operating in synergy, provided that in Europe we have the need is established by the regulation that the sandboxes should be supervised by the competent authorities. Sometimes you may have that you have cross-border sandboxes, so more member states cooperate, especially if they are small member states. So this is the first topic we are now discussing, right? Another topic we are discussing is the scope of the sandbox. One peculiarity of the AI Act, the European Regulation on Artificial Intelligence, that is horizontal, so it's covering all type of AI technologies, right? But you know, developing a horizontal sandbox requires important competencies and capabilities, because giving advice to AI technologies in the healthcare or in transportation or in energy may be different, right? Especially because the AI technologies are not standalone technologies. They are embedded in devices, for example. And that means that you may have a combination of different regulation, not just limited to the AI, but also to other type of contexts. So while the horizontal perspective is, I would say, the default option, but according to the regulation, could be difficult to be implemented. So alternatively, you may have vertical or domain-specific sandboxes, sandboxes devoted to healthcare, to energy, to transports, to critical infrastructure, to education and stuff like that, right? This is more doable in terms of competency, but then the question is, what topics, what domains should be taken into account by the member states in order to comply with the regulation, also to support the SMEs and startups. I already said the synergy with other initiatives, so I would say nothing about that. But one important keyword that are going around is flexibility and harmonization. They are different; they point to different directions, but they are both mentioned. Harmonization is needed because, as Juliana was recalling, we should develop a common framework for the sandboxes, because European Union is based on 27 different member states, but the regulation is European. But we also introduced some type of flexibility in implementation. Why? Because developing the sandbox requires investments, capabilities, and competencies. And different member states may have different competencies, capabilities, and supervising capabilities. So the fact that we have a framework doesn't require that all the different sandboxes in European Union will run exactly in the same way. So you may have different, combinations of competencies, of course, in agreement with what is established by the AI Act. One important thing that I was mentioning is exactly the sustainability of the sandboxes. I don't know in Brazil, but in Europe, this is definitely one of the most important issues now discussed. So making regulatory sandbox doable. And that's not obvious because competencies, especially bridging technology and regulation, they are very rare. You don't have many people knowing how to do so. Giuliano was mentioning AI and law. Well, the AI law is a competence that definitely is needed because it's not just a matter of to know, according to the European analysis we are running, to know what the AI Act or different regulation prescribe, but it's important to know how those prescriptions and those regulations can be operationalized in the technological level. One thing that I think I stop is the incentives for participating in the added value. So in Europe, at the moment, in the European Union, there are different incentives. I will mention 3 of them and then I stop. The first incentive is that in the AI Act, Article 59 is stated that if you train AI system within the sandbox, which is a control environment, you can use personal data with the secondary use or further use of data without asking for a new informed consent within the sandbox. So which means that when you want to run a regulatory test of AI technology, for example, in healthcare, you can use clinical data for which you already obtain an informed consent, but you can use them without asking for a new informed consent within the sandbox. Once you get out, you have to cancel all data and of course, blah, 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 but you already trained your system, okay? Another incentive is, and the AI Act allows to do so in some areas like healthcare, like critical infrastructure, like energy, transports, climate change, and stuff like that. Another reason for another added value is simulating the conformity assessment. So you are in the pre-market phase, but in the sandbox, you can simulate what could happen when you go on the market, right? And you are monitored, and your technology is monitored by the authorities in terms of conformity. I think that's a big value for the providers because the developer could find some gentle, friendly, cooperative framework where they could test such conformity. And the final thing is the investments, is the venture capital attractiveness. This is something very important in Europe now. And now European Union is considering how to remove all bottlenecks in order to help providers to develop their technologies without financial bottlenecks. And I think I stop here.
Well, great. Thanks, Nino. It was excellent. Maybe if you could still share your slides.
Yeah.
And if it's possible also to send to us, because we in our website we may make the slides available if there's not a problem with that. Could you get back a few slides? Let me see. The one that you discussed the scope.
Here.
Yeah. Okay, I'll ask some questions, just a few, because Diego has to make the presentation. I would like you to hear Diego so that our discussion from now on could be even more profitable and profitable. So intellectually profitable, of course.
Yes.
And well, about the geographical scope,
Yeah.
you mean at most it would be national. It couldn't be in whole Europe, the scopes, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. You should have a centralized in the European Commission, a centralized sandbox, because if someone from France can apply in Germany, then there will be some sort of forum shopping. I mean, startups would look for the sandbox which is less demanding, which has some advantages, and there will be a competition among sandbox environments, right? I'm not sure if I understood. Yeah.
No, that's correct. That's correct. That's the reason. That's the reason why member states are oriented to. I mean, one consideration is that one consideration is to give a priority to the AI providers of the member states. But this is exactly one of the points that are under discussion now. We will discuss this year in order to make sure that next year they will be fully operative. But in that's definitely one of the problems. Yeah, you are right. You are right. I mean, it could be a theoretical problem. I don't know if it's a practical problem, because SMEs and startups are not very much oriented to, they don't have resources to travel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends what type of sandbox you have in mind. If you have just a purely conversational sandbox, or you just give a legal advice without any testing, then you're right. But I think the added value of the sandbox could be slightly low, especially if your technology is mature. But
Yeah.
definitely that's one of the problems. Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me just make a comment so that you know what is the legal framework in Brazil. Actually, we don't have a law on AI. There is this draft bill that is under discussion in the House of Deputies now. It was already approved by the Senate. It has undergone many changes. But regarding previous authorization and then later responsibility, we have that there is no demand until now of a previous official certification for high-risk systems, as you have in Europe. So it is a risk-based approach, but the risk is on the companies. They have to evaluate if they are high risk, and they support the consequence of that. They wouldn't have a clearance by saying, well, it's approved, and it was already checked, and you are certified, you can go to the market. So the risk is upon them. And on the other hand, Brazil, in its regulation of liability, has not the so-called responsibility or liability gap that you have in Europe and in many member states, because there is strict liability in the Brazilian civil code, and actually, depending on the interpretation by the courts, there will be a stronger and stricter regime of liability in Brazil. So I believe the stakes are higher, will be higher if it's approved as it is, because Brazilian companies wouldn't have previous clearance on high-risk systems. And on the other hand, they would be exposed to a broader strict liability depending on the interpretation by the courts. So that would make sandbox more attractive in theory.
I see. But that's exactly one of the points that I'm pushing on, in the sense that we should get closer and closer, the possible closer, the pre-market, the post-market. But the the point in Europe, Giuliano, is that, I mean, this is the fact that this regulation is based on is a risk-based regulation, right? It's not the only risk-based regulation. Also, the Chinese regulation is based on risk-based. But the point is that if you run on the risk-based approach, then you have to align this with the liability issue. Actually, I cannot say there is a gap at the moment, but is potentially it can be potentially, you know, because the story has to be is not yet written in Europe, right, at the moment. But that's definitely one of the main points. So you're right. If you don't have this gap, that's definitely one value for the regulatory sandbox, definitely.
Okay, great. And I will move to Diego. I don't know if anyone has a question. I will just make a last comment in order to give the floor to Diego. Diego, I found it particularly interesting, the remark by Nino about consent. I will explain that because Nino, ANPD, the authority, is now it made a public consultation on the interpretation of the rules regarding autonomous decision making by systems and regarding AI, because there is it's still an open question in the interpretation of the Brazilian law, whether you have, for instance, to justify every data point in terms of its purpose in the development of AI systems, or if it is not really required. And actually, if you have systems that its application are general purpose or general enough that the result is going to be anonymized, if you need consent for the use of personal data. So these are open questions, and depending on the reply, the idea that you may have sandboxes where you wouldn't need this consent because it's a protected environment, and you make sure that the data are going to be deleted and not used anymore, then this will be attractive. I have just this comment because there are still open questions in the interpretation of even about the Brazilian data protection legislation, which is much more recent than in the European tradition. So there are these, and the regulatory sandbox that we are planning, since it is in the Data Protection Authority, it is more focused on privacy. Yeah? And also a different point, Nino, is that the draft bill is now, as designed, attributes competence for it provides competences for sectorial regulatory agencies, as well as to the Data Protection Authority in a residual sense. So the point that you said that if sandbox are vertically oriented, it would make sense, for instance, for the energy regulatory agency or the telecom regulatory agency to drive sandboxes that are specific. And this is something that we also have to think about, Diego.
Okay, very good. In the meantime, sorry, I pasted in the chat a link where you can find the roadmap. So it's a larger document, more detailed than the slides, and you can find, you know, the roadmap of the project. We started in December, so we have started very recently, but I think in the roadmap, you can find all the information needed.
Great.
Thanks, Giuliano. First of all, thanks for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here. Even, I mean, having this opportunity to engage in this this conversation with Professor Rotolo. So it's it's a very good opportunity so that we can discuss, I think, and cover a bit, because there's so much to to discuss. I think even to hear Professor Anino explaining a bit of how things are, how things are going, and the state of affairs in the EU with the EU AI Act. There's we have this pilot project still. We don't have actually like a regulatory framework on sandboxes in AI and sandboxes in data protection actually. So I think we are in the early stages, and I'll try to my idea is to share a bit of where we are now, and next steps about our regulatory sandbox, and and also to discuss a bit of our public consultation, a few of the takeaways. I have some. Let me share a few slides here. It's I think I'm. Can you see the slides? Yeah.
Okay. They are coming.
So I just want to
we can see it perfectly, Diego. You don't have to put in the presentation mode.
Okay.
I think we can.
Okay. No, so yeah. Just to a bit of context here, and we started this project of building up this regulatory sandbox on AI and data protection back in 2020. At the end of 2022, when it was like conceived. And in 2023, we started like really, we designed this study, this benchmark study. It was like a desk research, but also, we applied some surveys, so there's some empirical research as well. We have this bilateral conversations with other data protection authorities, the Norwegian Data Protection Authority, the United Kingdom Data Protection Authority, and a few others, and we launched this benchmark study that was like really the maybe like the building block for our the way that we conceive a data protection regulatory sandbox in AI and data protection, right? And we launched in October 2023. At the same time, when we rolled out and we launched this call for contributions, and this call for contributions that I will discuss in the next slide, we asked 17 questions. So we like have this this conception of what we think about the Data Protection Authority, think about a regulatory sandbox, what it should be, like these its outline, but we asked questions for the all different stakeholders so that they could send us contributions and send feedback. After this, we on November last year, we published our call for partnerships, and that's when I think Giuliano and his team enters in the stage, right? With this call for contributions, the Universidade of São Paulo and two other universities participated. They send us their proposals, and the Universidade of São Paulo team ended up as the selected one. And we started already our conversations as Data Protection Authority and the team of the Universidade of São Paulo, and we have yet to formalize it, but it's on track. We are on track. and probably in the next couple of weeks we will finalize that. And so the next step is the call for participation on May. That next month we are expecting to publish this call for participants, right? So for SMEs, startups, and public bodies as well, to participate in this pilot project. So that's where we are and where we are going to. And well, to talk a bit about our public consultation, in general, so we have this, we outlined this public consultation with 6 different chunks and so blocks of questions: technological scope, legal scope, multi-stakeholder involvement, what's the sandbox structure should be, and rules about sandbox transparency and other topics. I mean, in general also. So, but these topics are the 5 main topics. And so around technological scope, for example, one of the takeaways that we had, and well, just before that, just a quick disclaimer. The board of directors of the DPA haven't yet authorized or published all our findings, the technical note, this technical analysis that we've done with the public consultation. So what I'm sharing with you, it's just so like a few takeaways in general, but I don't know if further they will publish and publish this analysis, but just to share with you a few of the takeaways. So about the technological scope, the takeaway is that most of the first, let me just talk about the participation, and so before the takeaway, just this, we have received 71 contributions, and as you can see, most of the contributions came from the private sector, so the economic sector. So, but we also received contributions. The private sector is this orange part on the circle. We have also received contributions from the public sector, and the civil society as well have sent us some important contributions, academia and individuals also. They have also made and sent us contributions. So I think I have some. Later on, I can just. I think it's not very clear which in this
it's not clear which one is.
Yeah,
I was wondering.
Yeah.
So okay.
Let me. I will just. It's sorry for that, but I can assure you that this orange one is the this private sector. So we have this is the sector that have sent us most of the contributions. And so about the takeaways. Regarding the technological scope, most of the contributions really confirm that we should go on for regulatory sandboxes, regulatory sandbox focused on machine learning based AI systems and also generative AI. It's something that came out in the contributions around regarding the legal scope. We propose that we should focus on Article 20, right, of the Brazilian General Data Protection Law, that is the automated decision-making provision. So the right to revision of automated decisions is granted for data subjects according to this Article 20, this provision. So we're focused on this article, and yeah, the majority of the contributions understood that this is the right decision to make, and that's the point. I would like to highlight that as Professor Juliano mentioned, there is an ongoing public consultation around this very topic, this very article, Article 20, and the coordination of normatization is responsible for this initiative, right? And we, as the research and technology unit, we're working together with them, so that the idea is that the regulatory sandbox provides like empirical data, empirical information, and have some meaningful input to the regulatory action that will be, conducted and by the coordination of normatization. So we expect that one of the results of the regulatory sandbox will be just, we will inform and have some inputs to the BPA regulatory agenda, right? In this case, this regulatory action around Article 20, automated decision making. Another important takeaway is that there should be an articulation between the notion of algorithmic transparency and the principle of transparency of the LGPD. But there are, some nuances in there according to the actors. For example, this idea should be, balanced according to the actor involved. For example, algorithmic transparency to the data subject should be, it's a different perspective if we consider the algorithmic transparency between the data controller, for example, and the authority. And so these nuances should be considered. Sorry. And I think, it's almost had to leave just before.
Yeah.
I will just finalize that
I will just make a remark, Diego, if Nino has to leave now. I would like just to ask you if there is an English version of this document available.
No, sorry, I can't, but I can do it, this one. I can,
because I think it would be. I will also maybe I can build a group, because I believe this interaction with Nino's project will be very helpful to us, and it's particularly interesting since the focus highlighted by Nino, that they want to understand what these companies and startups need, that we have contributions by the private sector, predominantly in the public consultation. This might be useful also to Nino and to Nino's project. So if we could, actually, nowadays we have AI tools to make the translation, and And so,
sorry for that. It was like I done it really with yesterday night. Sorry.
no, I mean, there is a report on the public consultation, right, Diego?
Yeah, yes, but we haven't published this yet.
Okay.
Yeah, probably, for example, as we after the formalization of the partnership with the legal the team, probably we'll share this, but still we have to have the.
I think that would be interesting in terms of transparency, and it would be I think an interesting input to Nino, if I'm not mistaken, Nino.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I can manage in Portuguese, I can, but yeah, as soon as the information in the document is public, will be, yeah, this is one of the main points. Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yes, and for example, I can share that. Well, that one of the questions that it really, I mean, it clearly it's a concern that people from the enterprises, I mean businesses have is, for example, around liability, around like enforcement, and that's something that we, even though we don't have a regulatory a legal framework on this topic. In the public call, we will address this so that people, the participants, the stakeholders can have a better idea or a clear idea that we are really in good faith calling them for inviting them to test their innovation so that we can have a environment that really foster innovation in AI and data protection. But yeah, I agree that it's a very important point. I mean, to share in terms of transparency.
Yeah, well, this is one of our topics to discuss and to, well, okay. Thank you very much, Diego. Let us shift to Portuguese and say goodbye to Nino. Thank you very much, Nino. This will be a first of many meetings, I hope, to share ideas and discuss the matter. Maybe it would be interesting also to have some harmonization with
absolutely
with our projects here. Yeah.
I mean, thank you for having me. Great. I hope we will cooperate in the future. So there is a lot of things to do. So thank you for inviting me. Congratulations, Diego, for what you do. And yeah, I'm here, available. Thank you very much.
Okay, great, Nino.